we've all been there, haven't we? When we're about to present something, thinking, what happens if I F this up? I don't think I prepared properly. I don't feel 100% confident in how I'm going to present this. Most of us would say that we could improve our soft skills. It's something that I think actually a lot of us have in common, especially when we enter the working world. It's not something that you're necessarily equipped with from school or from university. You're just learning a curriculum. Levra, co-founded by Emily Gill, aims to solve this issue. Whereas we would only practice these soft skills when we actually have to use them, say a presentation, Levra is a totally different and unique idea. Part of the premise of Levra is that it uses virtual reality to trick your brain into thinking you are in that situation, when in reality you're obviously not. So you can practice those skills again and again, whether that be real life presentations or learning how to speak to your boss. The virtual reality environment gives you all of that, and you can practice it 10 times a day if you wanted to. I think it's a really great way of accelerating growth. But the trick is this, and this is the premise of the podcast. It's a tech firm. It's a learning tech firm. How the hell do you even create something like that? It seems quite complex, complicated. How does it even begin? Let's go into the first 100 days.
One of the coffee guys ended up introducing to us, like, to one of the best investors in the UK. What makes you really angry, or what makes you really excited? When do you feel alive? It's never going to be perfect. It's embarrassing when you turn up to big customers and you're showing them something that may look a bit shoddy. Get some sort of product to market as early as you possibly can. Collect so much feedback that you're bored of everyone saying the same bad thing about your product.
I'm just going to do this so I can clearly then link up the audio afterwards, because you can see a thing after. All right. Well, I think for full disclosure, we have actually recorded this once before, Emily, but my internet wasn't up to scratch, and it just wouldn't have been as good. So I'm very, very grateful that you've given up the time once again to chat to me.
Of course, and we'll probably have a totally different conversation this time around, so I hope it's equally as good.
I hope so. That's always the thing, when things start to freeze or it goes a bit wrong, it's hard to actually concentrate on the episode, because then you're just thinking about technical issues. So I'm sure it will be different and hopefully more rich.
You'll be listening in a different way this time then.
Yeah.
You'll be less worried.
100%. But I always think it's good to start with a bit of context. And I know you've worked in the corporate world before founding Levra with your co-founder. But I think actually before we press record, one thing that you told me, we were talking about starting a business, but it's key to actually find what the problem is. So I think it'd be good to get some context into your early life background that maybe explain why you wanted to start a business. Were there any traits in your life that you think, oh yeah, that makes sense now? But also, at what point did you find a problem? And then how long did it take to actually act on that and start Levra?
I was never one of those people that sort of grew up at the age of 4 or 5 with this big desire to have my own company. You know, my co-founder has always had this streak on him that he wanted to be an entrepreneur, whereas for me, that was never the case. And I grew up in a family that was very ambitious. And I think I'm a coach, and I think a lot of that actually came from my dad. Looking back reflectively, he was a big proponent of making sure you worked hard and achieved your best. And he really instilled in us, you can do anything in this world. So the idea of me founding a business was never really something there. But I think the values and how, you know, me, my brother and my sister were brought up as children to really like achieve the best was there from the start. And the fact that no obstacles were in our way, it was just go out and make an impact and create something. And he had his own company too. So maybe there was a little bit of seeing how he's built a company which is now 40 years old. He has people working for him across the globe, maybe that does also have an impact on your life. But where Levra was really founded was probably from a personal experience that I had. And as you mentioned, I worked in the corporate world. I was a corporate lawyer for 7 or so years, largely in London, but worked for a big Magic Circle law firm. And I saw so many young trainees and junior lawyers starting at our firm, intellectually brilliant. You know, they would know the law way better than I did, but lacking soft skills and what we at Levra call human skills, but the ability to communicate effectively, to deal with senior staff, to resolve conflict. And it was during COVID when we all started working from home and remotely, and you could see that workplaces were changing dramatically. Yet that younger generation, like the Gen Z workers, were never equipped with the tools that they needed to thrive. And that's really what Levra was about. And it did come from a personal experience that I saw and felt. And my co-founder, he was an accountant at Deloitte for a similar period of time, you know, in South Africa. So on a totally different content, in a different sector, yet we both had this very shared experience of us not really upskilling the Gen Z workers with the tools that they need to be a successful professional in the working world.
Why do you think that's the case? That particular generation seemed to be not as equipped as previous generations, perhaps?
I think it's a really multifaceted, complex problem, and there isn't one solution. I think the way we communicate has changed over the last 5 years, 10 years. We're suddenly communicating over so many different channels. Like, you know, you've probably got Slack and Teams and Google Meets, and you can probably email a partner or go and see them in person or call them. You know, when I was training, we were all in the office at the same time. So felt natural to go and approach people with questions. So I think the way that we live and work has dramatically transformed, not least because of like these things which sit in our pockets the whole time and interrupt conversations. I think our educational system fundamentally isn't structured to teach social skills. You know, it's really based on memorization and curriculum, and it doesn't necessarily teach you the skills that you need to be a good professional or a good human, actually. You know, when do you ever remember, looking back on your experience at school or university, anyone taught you empathy or what leadership was? And I think that's a big failing. Obviously, I understand the demands, but I think we're not really preparing our young adults for the realities of the working world.
Yeah, I wonder how much an impact phones do have on us, actually, given that I suspect 30 years ago or 10 years ago, people called each other a lot more, especially of a certain generation. Now, everyone just seems to message.
Yeah, you get a call and you look at your phone and you're like, I don't want to pick this up.
Yeah. They're going to come and rob me. But yeah, it's that. But then it's the self. I don't know what the way of phrasing it, but it's self-perpetuating, because then everyone messages more, it becomes more comfortable, then it's uncomfortable to do the other thing, and then it self-reinforces. I had a founder on actually not long ago who founded what's called the Light phone, which is a phone that is essentially all the functional components you would classically want without any real internet, WhatsApp, social media, that kind of thing.
Amazing.
And I actually bought one, so I'm very excited.
Did you?
I'm getting rid of the iPhone in January. I want to try out the idea of like calling people up in person and like engaging with the real world more.
Is it like those old school Nokias where they only have Snake on it?
Yeah.
This is probably a generational conversation.
Exactly.
Too,
Yeah.
but...
I'll link it actually to you after. It's it's more. It's not even out yet, so it's quite modern in the sense it has Google Maps and things like that, and it looks quite sleek and the design's quite cool, but it only has about 9 or 10 different things. It might have Snake, I don't know. But anyway, it made me, when you were saying that about the phone, it made me think that especially the use of social media and the way people communicate, I think it'd be very hard to argue against the fact that that's had a negative effect on people's ability to communicate in person, just because it's just so easy and risk-free to do the other method.
Yeah, and there's been some fascinating research that's come out about the impact that technology is actually having on young people's brains, how it's actually rewiring them.
Okay.
And these devices are addictive. Like, we will find them addictive. So we're putting them in the hands of like a 15, 16-year-old. Of course, it's going to affect how they behave and how they interact. So yeah, I think we're just underestimating the power that an iPhone has. And I'm not saying that's the cause of all of these issues. As I said before, I think it is really complex. It's multifaceted. You know, you have working from home, it's changed interactions and workplaces as well. So I think there's a lot of complex things that are now happening that's just affecting our ability to communicate effectively.
People will often say they come across issues all the time, or certainly it's something that people think about occasionally. You can have an experience where you think, wow, people aren't that equipped to communicate necessarily in the real world right now in a certain generation. But not everyone acts on it, or pretty much no one acts on it. What was the motivation once you diagnosed that issue to think, oh, I actually want to start a business around this now? Because it's a big step. People have ideas all the time, but to actually think, oh, I'm going to take action here is, very few people do that.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to leave the legal world, so I knew making the most of my own skills and attributes. And maybe that's a question for anyone listening out there. If they're in a job and they're thinking, is this the right thing? I think I thought a lot about what is it that I want to do instead, and what would that look like? And that really drove me to leave becoming a lawyer. And I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do next. But I did end up leaving and doing a master's in business, so an MBA at Oxford. And that was really, I mean, firstly, it was like I needed a break. I'd done 7 years of very intense, long hours working in a profession I wasn't really sure about. It's not for everyone. And I needed time to think actually really what's next. So I think the conversation about doing an MBA, I think, is very topical. Everyone always says, is it worth the money? Like, what is the real impact that it gives you? For me, it gave me a time to like pause and to reflect and to really think. It was a year course, but to really think, what is the impact that I want to have on the world? And again, whilst I was doing the MBA, we did an entrepreneurship project, and that's really where Levra was formed. We were working in a group of 5 of us. We had the opportunity to come up with a business idea, and it grew out of that. So life is serendipitous. I mean, had I not left the legal world, had I not done an MBA, had I not grouped with these 5 individuals, I don't know whether Levra would have come into fruition. But the timing felt right.
Was there a moment or a day where things really picked up with Levra, where you had the idea, you're on this course, you meet your co-founder on this course as well, and then you agree on the same issues? How does that work on a micro level?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because you're suddenly on this course with 350 individuals from 75 different countries across the world. Even though, despite it being in Oxford, there was 11 of us from the UK. So it really is this like incredible melting pot of people from different backgrounds, people who have, done chemical engineering in Japan, and you just have this brilliant and rich way of kind of sharing ideas. And I don't know if I believe in those like light bulb moments of suddenly like coming up with a business idea, and it just suddenly comes to you. My experience is it's more of a snowball effect. You think of something, you bash it around with a few other people, they suggest something else to you, you then discuss it a bit further. And that was certainly how Levra came into being. we chatted about it for probably over 6 months. We did a lot of market research about it before we even considered, right, are we going to actually take this full time? So for people out there that are maybe have something in their back pocket or have an idea, share it with other people, because I think that is really when you can test, like, does this land? Do people see the issues that I'm seeing? And it goes back to our discussion just before the call. It's really think hard about the problem. And I think we started speaking to people about the problem and everyone got it. Everyone knew someone who was intellectually brilliant, amazing a CV, but just didn't know how to pick up the phone. Everyone had experienced that themselves or had seen their younger sibling experience that. And the more you talk to people, the more you can like validate your idea. And I think that's a really important step of the process.
The obvious point I'd back to you if I said that to people is, oh, I'm scared that people are going to nick my idea.
I think you can live in a world where you're worried about people taking your idea, but you have to be the one that has the passion and the vision and carries that. It's pretty bold for someone to hear a good idea and drop tools and decide to take it up themselves. I also think like ideas change. Like what Levra is today, upskilling Gen Z workers, is probably going to be so different in 2 years' time. So your idea now, you may think it's going to be the next Airbnb or Uber, but both of those companies started off as completely different ideas in the first place. So your idea will change. I just think the power of sharing and collaboration is so helpful in like really analyzing, is this going to float?
I'm reading a book at the moment called Who Not How, and the prime message in it is that we are often told when we have an issue, we need to think, how are we going to solve it? But the way we should start thinking about things is, who can help me solve it? And that points to a lot of what you were just saying, of the feedback from individuals and speaking to them and trying to bounce ideas off each other and getting a co-founder and just trying to get people on board and create a buzz about it. Yeah, it reminded me of that a bit.
Absolutely. And I think Steve Jobs talks famously about the most important role that he had was creating an A team. And that's really what any company is about. It's about the people, right? We've all probably worked in places where the people haven't been great and where they have. And it's the people that you work with that will change that and like make an idea land. So I think you're totally right about who can you speak to, who can help you turn a flicker of hope into something which is actually like a company.
Let's go into the first 100 days once Levra had started to form. There's some really good points here, and some of them I can remember the answers from last time, but some of them I can't because it cut out. So let's go over these again. I'm really intrigued about a few of these actually. Reached out to 100 customers to understand if they also recognize the skills gap as a problem.
Yes, and I think this goes back to the point about really creating a company around a problem. It's all very well to have a nice to have, but how is your company going to be a must have in the world? And I think that stems from what is the problem you're trying to solve? And is that problem big enough? Does it have a market? What is the size of that market? How many people are experiencing this problem? Is it just like a local problem? Is it something within your area? Is it something experienced globally? So we spent, after leaving Oxford and deciding, okay, let's give this a go, whatever this is, let's see what happens. We did a lot of cold outreach and warm outreach to kind of people who we knew within the professional services firms. And we're a bit cautious. So we took it from a bit of a like, look, we're trying to research this at the moment. We've just spent our last year at Oxford. We're really interested in whether you're noticing that young Gen Z workers are lacking human skills. Would you be up for chatting for 20 minutes? And that really was all it was, is, have you seen this? Like, is this something you're noticing? And again, it goes back to speaking to other people, but you start to be able to then piece this puzzle together as you have those conversations with potential customers, but not going in with any expectation. And they then give you nuggets of information that you never knew about, stories about, you know, how people have turned up to work and ended up leaving and going home or resigning because they haven't felt comfortable speaking to senior staff. You know, that type of information that really demonstrates to you, actually, this is happening across the globe and in some of the world's leading institutions.
It's quite exciting in a way when you start to hear that feedback, because you can obviously have a theory of, yes, this is an issue. But then when you start speaking to people, and as you articulated, over 100 plus customers or clients, getting that reinforcement that, yes, this is an issue not only locally, but potentially across the world. It must be, obviously it's sad in a way because there is an issue and that's something that hopefully you can fix. But at the same time, it does prove that you're thinking, wow, this is a problem. And we can try and fix this.
Yeah, spot on. And I think the follow-on question we always asked was, having let them speak for, 17 out of the 20 minutes about the problem, we would then say, and so what are you doing about it? And it would honestly be like, people would look back at us blankly and sort of say, well, not really much, we're so busy and we've got so much else going on and budgets and pressures and da 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 da. And that response almost was as equally good. Like, not only are they recognizing the problem, but they haven't identified an effective way to solve this problem.
Yeah, just thinking that through. That's true, because there's just so much going on that, one, that you've identified the issue, two, they've played that to you back and confirmed there is, but also three, it's clear that they aren't really addressing it / don't have the resource. That's where you come in. By that point, had Levra, the product, actually been formed in any way, or is this still the feedback stage where you didn't necessarily have a plan to articulate, but it was more just, yes, there is something here that we can help with?
This was still at the very beginning. So we incorporated the company 27th of September, actually 2 years ago tomorrow. So this was still very much we kind of knew the various different tools we were going to think about tackling it, but this was just, is there a problem? Are our customers seeing the problem? And then the next step, I guess, for people thinking about their own companies is, well, who are the competitors? Because there have to be other people that are trying to do something similar, or they're trying to look at it. And I'm always cautious when I hear other founders that say to me, oh, well, we don't have any other competitors. There must be some competitors in order for there to be a market, or for this to actually be viable. So if you have an idea and you know there's a problem, who are the competitors? What is currently being done to address the problem? And why maybe is that inadequate? Why isn't that actually an effective way to solve the problem?
Found office space, still in the same space we use today, but having a base helped to formalize what we were doing.
Yeah, being together with people, and when you're a small team, again, I think was very important for us growing quite quickly, quite early. When you're sitting next to your founder and day in, day out, and you're just throwing ideas like a ping pong ball back between each other, it really helps. I know people have made that work from home, or hybrid working, flexible working, however you want to call it, really effective. But I think we certainly found, and maybe this is because what we practice is the human skills, it is the interactions, but being together and being able to know that every day would be in the office kind of gave us a sense, I think maybe it was stability as well. And maybe that's also, it shows we both came from a corporate background, and we still needed the idea of like having a desk and a chair to sit on as some sort of comfort that we were actually doing something that wasn't just a complete, I don't know, work from home experience. But it's more just creating somewhere which physically you can like bring people together, you can formulate ideas, you can be together, rather than just being in like, a coffee shop the whole time where everything's a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, as you've articulated earlier, you need to be able to bounce ideas off each other. So if you're working at home, it's just so hard to do that, and you just don't feel as much energy, and you don't feel as if you're as part of something if you're all just sat at home separately working, like being in the same work environment. I think there's times where maybe it helps to be isolated a bit if you've got a particular task that you need to do. Maybe that's more relevant for the corporate world. But yeah, I can absolutely imagine it's quite exciting as well at the beginning, being in your own office space, thinking, yeah, we're really doing something here. That's just, you can't really replace that experience. Got used to negativity and positivity and to treat them both as the same.
Yeah, I think I've become a little bit numb to emotions. I maybe need to ask my husband what he thinks about that. But you're on this journey when there's so many highs and lows, and I personally, and this might not be for everyone, but I personally have found it easier to be a little bit detached from the outcome, whether that's an investor saying yes or no to you, or a customer saying yes or no to you, or something going well and you winning an award, or something going badly and you losing a customer at last stage. I've personally found it easier just to detach myself from going through that roller coaster of emotion and really focus on the things that I can control, the things that I can do in my day to keep pushing the company forward. And again, that I think it's focusing on the process of it all, like realizing this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I'm sure anyone who's starting a company or thinking about it, it's not, you sometimes read those headlines and it feels like it's overnight success. X company makes, 500 million within 3 years. And you see that headline and you think, oh my gosh, that's instant success. But behind the scenes, there will have been days of pain and arduous journey, and day in, day out. So my advice is probably that maybe what's been helpful for me is to remove yourself from the outcome and more focus on the process of what is it that you're actually trying to build and what is the bigger mission here.
Does that come with practice? Because I imagine if it's your first time building a company, it's sometimes quite hard to do that, especially if you just don't have the experience at the beginning. Did you always have the ability to remove yourself from the outcome, or is it something that you've learned?
Yeah, I think it's a skill you learn, like all of these things and the things that Levra teaches. Like we we have a sort of philosophy about this idea of a growth mindset. There's this amazing woman called Carol Dweck who actually formulated the idea of having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset is this idea that you're born with certain attributes or certain skills, and you're either a good swimmer or you're not, or you're good at maths or you're not. If you develop this idea of having a growth mindset, it's the realization that actually you may not feel confident giving a speech in front of 100 people, but it's something you can practice and something you can develop. And you're probably right in the same instance of this. I really believe in the power of like change, and that if you really want to change as an individual yourself, you can. I don't think you can change others, but if you want to become better at something and maybe become more detached from your emotions or become a better public speaker, it takes time and you have to work on it, but it is possible. I don't know what you think about that, like whether you have had experiences of maybe improving at something or being able to change the way that you think.
I agree with you on the growth mindset. I was thinking of a story actually where when you're talking about maths, I always have this joke with my mum because she always says I can't do, like, she herself can't do maths, and I always say no, if you tried hard enough you could. No, honestly, no, I can't. And there's always that conversation, especially around public speaking or technical skills like maths, where you speak to certain people and they're just like, no, I can't do it. No. I don't know if there's any element of truth in that. I'm sure if they tried hard enough, they'd get good at it. I suppose then the distinction being that, people that are amazing at something, is there an element of genetics there that's maybe the 5% that gets them right to the top, but actually the 95% is the growth part? I don't honestly know the answer to that, but I do know, for example, we could say that, it's unlikely you or I are going to break the world record for a marathon. Although I suppose if we train, when I say unlikely, it's almost certainly not going to happen, unfortunately.
Will,
But,
you don't know my running capabilities.
I do. Yeah, I don't.
I've won a marathon before as well.
You know what? I was about to say that I'm sure you would be faster than me.
No.
But I think the current world record holder has run a marathon under 2 hours. So I'm sure if we really tried, we could get like better than 99% of people, I reckon. But do you think there's an element of maybe 5% that is genetic?
Yeah, no, I do believe, I do think, we are born with natural attributes, and I fit in your mum's camp, right? I'm really, really bad at maths, but to get into Oxford, you have to do these exams called the GMAT or the GRE. And like, I come from I'm language based. I'm a lawyer. Like I'm okay with words. Maths and numbers just was never my bag. And it took me a good year. I gave up maths after doing GCSEs at the age of 16. I hadn't touched a book since. So I was relearning maths, over maybe 15 years later. It was tough, like really tough. I was up at 6 o'clock every morning trying to rewire my brain to understand like how to explain, like how to work out a quadratic equation, like stuff that I'm sure you would find really simple because you work in finance. So I get your mum's conundrum about the maths thing, because I do think some of us are born with things we find easier and things that we don't find more challenging. And I'm not going to say it's easy for everyone to walk up on stage and speak in front of people. My co-founder is brilliant at it and he's always loved it. He's come from a drama background. It's something that's always in his blood. For me, it's a little bit more challenging and I've had to really practice it. And I've had coaching and, it feels like I've had to put in more effort, but I think it's a choice that you make. Do you want to be good at maths? Do you want to be good at public speaking? Do you want to be a better communicator? And if you make the decision that actually I want to be better at something, then that opens the possibility, well, how can I go about doing this?
I completely agree. And then it's also how badly do you want to be good at it? Because you can have people that are, I want to be good at it. But then people say that about lots of things and then don't take any action. But if you truly, to an extreme level, if you want to become good at public speaking, you'd put that practice above pretty much everything else in your life, and you'd only practice that. And I'm pretty sure after about a month, you'd probably be better than most people in the world at public speaking if you only did that for a month.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that really rings true with the experience of being a founder and starting a company. That resilience and that mindset is so important. Like, how bad do you really want this? Because I actually know like quite a few people that started companies leaving Oxford and, they made it work for a bit, but sadly, one way or the other, their journey hasn't continued. And that resilience and knowing like, actually, I really want to make this work. I think a lot of founders across the world do speak quite openly how that is such a big thing, to that drive and that motivation just to keep you going.
Spoke to hundreds of people, advisors, investors, coaches, customers, and fellow entrepreneurs. And I know you mentioned earlier that you spoke with 100 plus customers and got feedback, and they identified the issue. They also said they're not really addressing it. But that point that I've just outlined that you sent to me earlier explains that you didn't just speak to potential customers, but you spoke to a much wider base of individuals. So how did that go? What was the value in that? How did you actually reach out to them and get them to agree to speak to you?
Yeah, we still do that. Like, we literally had someone in our office yesterday, an incredible French man. probably about 65, who we'd met at a networking event, who is really interested in Levra. You know, we have an advisory board made up of, you know, 3 really quite incredible individuals. We're always speaking to people. And I think it goes back to where we started the conversation, was like, I always feel like 2 brains are better than 1. So imagine the power of 50 brains in compared to 1. And there's people in this world that have specialisms or insights that you can really leverage as a founder. I think the challenging thing is asking for help, which again, I was never very good at. It was always that idea that if you ask for help, it's almost like you're acknowledging something's wrong or a weakness on your behalf, or can you help me with maths because I'm not very good at it? But when you put that kind of vulnerability aside and realize there's actually a lot of people out there that want to help, and I'm sure we've all had experiences of someone asking us for help, and it's felt quite good inside, like that warm fuzzy feeling when you're like, oh, they're coming to me for help. You know, if you also are that person that says, I know you're an expert in go to market, or I know you're a branding expert, do you have 20 minutes just to chat about this? People will really go out of their way to help you. And I think that's how you can build a very strong company. Diversity of thought, the input from lots of different people, you know, people that will challenge your assumptions, people that will question why you're doing something. So again, it's just advocating. You don't have to do it alone, even though maybe you've got a small team or it's just you. Remember that people would be very willing to help you.
So that's something you did very much, although you're doing it now. In the early days, say first 100 days, you were speaking to potential investors or advisors, individuals within the same sector.
Yeah, no, we definitely did, like, and it happened organically. You have one conversation and then someone else just speak to people, whoever it is. You know, we often we work in Soho and have this amazing little Berwick Street. There's a market down us. We always speak to the stall people. One of the coffee guys ended up who runs Soho Dairy on Berwick Street, ended up introducing to us, like, to one of the best investors in the UK. Like, the world has funny ways of working itself out. You know, never underestimate the power of sitting next to someone on the bus and telling them your idea. It's called the mum test, but like, could you explain your idea really simply to a mum, to your mum, you know? But talking to people is something we did in our first 100 days a lot, something we continue to do now. It becomes a little bit different now. Like, we have a more formal advisory board. You know, we meet with them once a month. The conversations change somewhat because they become less exploratory and more, right, what's the strategy for the next month? What do we really need to be focusing on? But I would, again, just encourage people to use something which is unique to all of us, and that's like the ability to communicate and to interact with others.
I love that story about the coffee guy introducing you to an advisor, because it's not an obvious route, is it? If you were to sit down and logically think about how you get an investor, that would not likely be the first route you would think of. But then it's always sometimes the most like illogical thing you would think of ends up being the route.
Yeah, the world has a funny way of like working itself out. I slightly do believe in serendipity and just, well, maybe it's more than the law of attraction. I don't know if you know about it well.
Law of attraction.
Yeah.
I could give it vaguely. Isn't it where you give off some energy and then the person also has the same energy comes to you? Is that right?
Yeah, it is like that, but it's more, I guess maybe the modern world is like manifesting, like putting yourself out there, like really kind of imagining the best success story that could come from whatever it is you kind of idealize or manifest in your brain. And that law of attraction, like, you know, thinking very, very positively that you're going to have like good customer reception. And it's a bit hokey pokey and like, I don't know whether there's actually been any research done on it, but I think the thoughts and the way you put yourself out there can be a very powerful way of attracting people. And enthusiasm and positivity and optimism, like all those things are, I would say, pretty essential to those first few years of starting a company, or the first 100 days, like being positive.
I definitely think that there's truth to that. And actually, on a technical level, I'm sure your actions change if you think in a certain way. If you have a view that it's going to be a really good outcome, or you want to put this out in the world, if you're constantly thinking about that, your actions will change, and you'll probably speak to more people because it is always on your mind and it's there. But also thinking about things, I do also just anecdotally say that. I'm trying to think. Say there's that thing where if you like scrape metal with a knife, it gives a horrible sound. And if you can sort of, if I describe it now, it almost feels like it's happening. You know what I mean? You have that horrible feeling in your head. I think
Yes.
if you do think about things, sometimes I don't think your brain is able to determine if it's real or if you're just thinking about it. So therefore, it sometimes just rethinking a situation again and again can give you some practice of it without actually doing it. Obviously, there's a limit, but I do think there is a bit of leeway there.
Absolutely. And there's, going back to this idea of public speaking, there has been a lot of research that has been done about people changing their conception of fear and nervousness into excitement. So before you're going to a speech or a presentation, actually, like when you feel those butterflies and you feel that those nerves, or however the emotions show up for you, saying this isn't just nervousness, it's because I'm excited, it's because I'm excited about the opportunity to present in front of people or speak. So there has been a lot of research about how you can actually control your own emotions and shift them into a more positive way of thinking or being.
Oh, for sure. And also, one of the questions I think when people are nervous, I've been in the situation, is, are you actually prepped enough? Like, have you actually practiced? Because often nerves can come from just a lack of practice, where there is an uncertainty. Whereas if you practice it so much that you know it inside out, or you feel confident in that way, then I definitely think that alleviates some of the anxiety. I think just coming to your fifth point, Emily, part of challenging accelerator coaching group of our lead investor, Sterling Road, where you had to report back on what you had achieved every week, included other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so very early on, we were part of an accelerator. So that's just sort of a group of other entrepreneurs that maybe go through some sort of like startup program. And I think this was, again, helpful at the very beginning for us to go through some sort of like rigorous way of challenging our ideas. And we've touched upon it already, but it was in a forum where we had to every week report back on what we had done in the last week, how many customers we had reached out to, what had been the feedback. And that type of rigor has actually stuck with us. I don't know whether maybe also it's an impact of our corporate careers, but we have weekly team strategy meetings. We have set monthly agendas. I think working in a startup or a small company, it can feel quite chaotic at times. There's a lot of moving parts and moving pieces and ideas here, and should we build the website now, and do we need to be focusing on customers and what's happening with our investors? If you can implement some sort of structures that actually help your decision-making process, we have found it incredibly valuable. So bringing the team together at specific points so you can all talk about, the biggest 5 concerns at the company right now, or the biggest concern. And that we learned quite quickly early on, that this idea of, if you're reporting back to, at the time it was to our lead investor, but Now we report back to each other, like, have we achieved what we wanted to achieve in the last month? Have we achieved what we wanted to achieve in the last week? And I think implementing some sort of structure has been a helpful thing for us as a business.
If I'm listening back to this, Emily, I'll probably be aware about what Levra does. I'll also just do a little intro that explains that as well. But I'll also probably be thinking, okay, there's some quite cool technology here of how you can improve your ability to public speak, or at least address a boss, or just generally communicate. You have some, quite impressive VR technology, and also some more rudimentary modules as well. How do you technically actually get those up and running? What are the steps to actually get that product out there? Appreciate, I'm slightly breaking the rules outside the first 100 days, but yeah, I'm just very intrigued as to how you actually execute on that.
Yeah, very good question. How we chose to go to market was using a relatively low cost, low code solution. So me and my co-founder aren't from technical backgrounds. And rather than spend £3 million building a VR solution, not knowing whether the customers would like it, we leveraged existing technology, which we could develop ourselves. So our Levra platform, we don't own the underlying tech, although we have been able to kind of build on that platform and develop it. And similarly with our VR experiences, our workplace scenarios, we have partnered with a leading VR company in America, and they own the underlying platform, and we own the scenarios that sit on that platform. Again, this was very well thought through. We wanted to go to market quickly. We wanted to see, like, do learners actually enjoy experiencing VR in comparison to e-learning? Because that wasn't something we knew with certainty. How do they interact with our platform? Do they like the idea of bite-size human skills videos? So we intentionally chose not to go and build deep tech very early on. It's something we're looking to do next year. And when we raise our next investment round, is to then bring all of that technology in-house and to develop our own tech. But for the first 2 years, we wanted to test, like, is this a viable solution? Which we have proven. So that's been good too. But I would say everyone talks about MPV, like getting something out there as quick as possible. And I would say that's probably relevant maybe even in the first 100 days. Like, it's never going to be perfect. It's embarrassing when you turn up to big customers and you're showing them something that may look a bit shoddy. That's when the power of, like, a founder about conveying your mission. This is what I want the company to be in 2 years' time. This is how we're going to transform it. Get some sort of product to market as early as you possibly can and collect feedback. Like, collect so much feedback that you're bored of everyone saying the same bad thing about your product. So actually what is it that you need to improve on.
It's the who, not how thing again, isn't it? In terms of the VR partnership, because you're partnering with someone else who can provide you that technology, and then you own, as you say, the scenarios on top. I'd be interested to just, before we end the pod, there's just a couple of bits I'd love to chat about more. One of which is, even before the feedback stage of just coming up with the problem again, I could be a listener that's got, maybe a chip on my shoulder and just thinking, oh, Emily, it's okay for you. You found the issue. I want to build a business, but I don't really have a problem, etc. Is there any tips you have of how you actually find a problem? For instance, something I was thinking about the other day is maybe pick a sector you're interested in. I'm sure most people could do that, whether that's hospitality or it's some field in tech or medical or whatever, and then start speaking to people in the industry about problems they're facing, and then aggregate all of that feedback and work from that. And there should be issues that lie in there. Do you agree that could be quite a useful way of finding a problem, or is there any other useful, effective ways to actually find that issue?
Good question. having spoken to a lot of founders, most of the companies, and this isn't all, but most of them, I would say maybe 75% plus, have founded a company based on something that they've found annoying or something, a problem they have experienced. What I think is essential is that you actually really, really care about this issue or whatever the idea is. So I would almost go from an emotional lens rather than a research driven approach. I think research and data is crucial, but when you're formulating the company idea, like I would be and I don't know if this is the coach in me, but I would be tend to think more about what makes you really angry, or what makes you really excited, or when do you feel alive? Those sort of things, about trying to find an area or trying to find something that stimulates some sort of like interest or passion or burning desire inside of you, because that's really what's going to keep you going for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. It's that passion and that interest. So you could approach it from, like, if you don't know what that idea is, the research that you suggested. Well, my inclination would be to, what's one thing that really pisses you off, or what's one thing that really excites you, and is there something around that you could build from?
Everything then stems from there, doesn't it? If you feel so strongly about something, then all of the next steps just naturally come from that desire to fix it. Without, I suppose, the strong inclination to do that, then maybe there are days when you may just give up because you just don't care about it enough.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's what creates lasting success. Like, if you only feel 82% passionate about something, the idea is not going to stick, because people are clever, right? If you're pitching in front of someone, if you're speaking to someone, if they know that you don't really care, or you kind of think it's a good idea, like, you can suss it out so quickly. Like, an investor has had however many people pitching in front of them, and they can tell very, very quickly, like, does this individual actually really want to solve this problem? And should I really back them? So yeah, I would be like, even though everyone tells you at work, don't be led by your emotions, and emotions don't have a place, like, I think that gut feeling is so, so important. So find something that's really sticky, that annoys you, that you feel really passionate about, and go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Don't be led by your emotions. Don't ask for help. It turns out all of those things might not be true. In the end, you said something at the beginning which I found, I think, is just an amazing thing to be told when you're younger. You said you were told by your parents, or one of your parents, you can achieve anything you want in the world. Do you think that formed how you've viewed the world before Levra and how you view it now? And if so, how do you view the world? Is it something where you can just achieve anything you want? It's an optimistic place, or is it more of a nuanced situation? I ask all the guests I have on that question. I'm just really intrigued by it.
Children are sponges, and I have a young daughter myself. She's only 1, but I see how quickly she learns things, and the biggest thing that influences a child's future prospects are actually the first 1 to 5 years of their lives. Going back to what I said at the beginning about my dad saying to us, you can achieve anything. He would say it quite regularly, and looking back, maybe it was weird, but I think it was installed from us from very, very early on, like, if not you, then who? And if you grow up with that sense of, I can do anything, the world is limitless, it does give you, I think actually what it gave me was probably confidence. And I think that is a really incredible thing to give your child, or to give anyone, in fact, like, the ability to think confidently and positively about life. And I would say that was the biggest thing that my parents gave me, is the confidence to take a risk, to leave the legal world, to do something different, to push to achieve my very best. And I've always been inclined that way. And so, in answer to your question, I think, again, it's that nature nurture conversation. Like, is this something we're born with, or is this something we can develop? I think it helps to have a little bit of both. So I think if you are born with the thoughts and the ideas that I can do anything, you hear about loads of sports stars, right? That their parents from the get-go, were taking them out and saying, you're going to be the best tennis player in the world, you're going to be the best golfer in the world, you're going to be the best footballer. And that ends up rubbing off. And so I think that side of, for all those parents out there that may be thinking, how do I raise my children, or what can I do to help them have a more successful future, I definitely think that, like, really honing in on the words that you're using. Are you telling your daughter that she can be an astronaut rather than just a mother? There's so many things that I think are really powerful in the way that we talk to our children, and we instill those values and habits very early on.
Such a good way to end the pod. Emily Gill, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Will. So pleased we finally got the good sound quality working.
We've done it.
Can I say a final thing?
Please,
do people say that your voice is like Stephen Bartlett's?
I don't. I've had it a couple times.
It sounds so similar.
Did it really?
Yeah, and I think that's the way this podcast is going. Diary of CEO fame.
I must admit, I had one or two drinks last night, so my voice always gets a bit lower the next day, if that's the case. So maybe I'm not sure.
Well, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, just crack on. But yeah, his podcast is great. He's very good at the storytelling bit, whereas all his guests, there's a whole beginning to end of the story. It's very intriguing. So he's done insanely well.
No, he's done so well. I don't know whether it's a bit theatrical now, like some of the sound bites and everything. It feels a little bit gimmicky, but I know he's also like a branding and marketing expert. So it all comes with a specific lens, right?
100%. And you've got, they employ someone just to do the trailers, like only the bit. Like full-time job. So it's everything now. It's just a high production exercise, but that I suppose is the way you go. I think the issue I think the natural issue that always occurs with those once you get to the top is the amount of guests you have on is actually quite limited. And then you tend to get guests that just go around all the podcasts, and then you end up having to go slightly more extreme to get newer guests on because the normal pool you've already done. So I think it's hard just to carry on going and keep on getting world-class guests because there's only so many people in the world of the level that they want to talk to, where they've released 5 books or 10 books, or they've done, they've sold $1 billion company. There is only limited people in the world that would do that.
What about you? Like, last question for me before you leave. Who's been the most impactful person that you have interviewed?
It's very good. It changes a lot, and often it doesn't really hit home for about 3 weeks after we've recorded. I did. There's 2, and obviously apart from the episode we've just had Emily, but notwithstanding.
Say that to everyone.
Yeah, notwithstanding. I did an episode with the founder of a company called Freddy's Flowers, which is a flower delivery service in London. That was just, I just felt that was just an amazing conversation, and he really told us the story well of how he started it and the struggles, and I just felt like I was with him in that journey. And for me, it just gave me a lot of confidence of like, yeah, I can also do this. I also think in person really helped as well. And the second was I interviewed, I support a football club called Ipswich Town, and I went to America on holiday, but also I'd somehow managed to get an interview with one of the owners of Ipswich at his home in the US on the East Coast. And that was just incredible because he just, he'd sold a couple of companies and he'd done X, and he was just giving such a good overview of how he'd done it. I think it's hard sometimes to articulate the impact it has on you. But I just have a great feeling from that, and it just gave me a lot of impetus as well. He also suggested that book, Who Not How, and that's something that I
Really?
feel is definitely a mindset shift for sure.
Well, it sounds like I need to read that book then.
Yeah, you should. It's really good. You could probably read half of it and get the actual gist. To be honest, it's not hugely long, but and I think actually you've practiced it already by the sounds of things. But I think it's such a good mindset shift, because I really do think we often, our default is to think, how can I fix this? Whereas actually, okay, you should, even if you're outsourcing something, maybe you should understand how it's done in the first place before you outsource.
Yeah.
But you should try and bring other people on board, because they will have one, connections, and two, as you say, 50 minds is so much better than one. Yeah, real mindset shift.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. So good to
All
chat
right.
to you again.
Oh, I've loved it. Really, really loved it. And I'm just so pleased that it went so smoothly this time.